Hello Soul Bridge family, I am here today to talk to you about a special request that I got from one of our members. It's about the grief stages and responses. When we're talking about depression, there's a lot of different forms and a lot of different reasons and a lot of different terms that all get mixed up and get called depression. So I'm going to kind of unpack that a little bit. So first I want to talk to you about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She actually defined stages of grief. And I'm going to tell you what the stages are, and then I'm going to tell you how this plays out in all these different names that we call grief or bereavement or depression, and let's unpack that. So if you get bad news, something's up with you, something is starting to affect you, it might affect you physically or emotionally, and you'll go through these different stages. And so how severe the stages are or how long it lasts, that kind of defines these other things, and also what it does to your body, your emotions, your body chemistry, things like that. So we do need to unpack that. But if you have something that you're dealing with, you have two choices. And the first choice is usually going to be denial. Oh no, that's not happening. Oh, this is going to be temporary. Oh, that I can probably avert that. And you'll go through planning things for, how to avert something before it happens. Like you're getting news, somebody's buying the house you're renting and they want you to move out. Your pet has a bump and you hope it's not a tumor or something like that. And so the first thing will be denial. Denial is perfectly normal. Oh, that's not going to be a problem. I can deal with that. Oh, we'll figure something out. And you put it out of your mind because, of course, we're really busy. And you have things to do and people to meet and deadlines and bills. And so we work with denial for a while, like push it back. Let's not think about this for now. And then the next one is anger. Damn it, it's really what I thought it was. They're really going to buy this house. My pet's bump really is a tumor. And now I'm angry. And you sit and you figure out what you could have done about it. Is there anything that you could have done about it? So you go through the next step, which is anger. And I'm going to go through this whole Elizabeth Kubler-Ross stages again later on, and we'll see how this plays out with these different manifestations. But the next one would be anger, and that's great because if a person's being abused or they went through domestic violence or rape or something like that, denial and numbness, because it is kind of a numbness, works for a while, but it doesn't help you heal. And so therapist's role is to try and get you up to the next stage, which is anger, because then you're back in your body, right? You're grounded in your body, you're feeling what's actually happened to you, and you're starting to process. So anger is a really healthy response. It's higher than numbness. I don't know what to do, so I don't do anything, and putting it out of your mind and then waiting for it to happen again. The denial part and the numbness is not healthy. Anger is healthier. That's one step higher. In fact, it gets you into your first chakra. So now you're not out of your body. You're actually in your body. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please refer to my earlier videos where I talk about chakras and also where I talk about layers of the aura, because how you're processing, how your body's managing that is going through your layers of your aura also. The next step will be bargaining. So you start to go, okay, how about if I do this or do that? Like, what do we do to, can I have 6 more months before you kick me out? Can I have, trying to delay or work around the inevitable. So the bargaining part. And also people start to maybe seek their higher power, or they might seek drugs. Like, I don't want to think about this. The next part after anger is trying to figure out how you can manipulate or control that situation. And maybe you can, or maybe you can't. The next part after that might be depression. And then acceptance, okay? Depression we're going to unpack in a minute. Acceptance is like, I can't do a darn thing about that. But accepting that your pet has a tumor and he's really going to pass away, or accepting that, yeah, they're really selling your house and you really need to move out. You start looking for places to move to. You start dealing with it. But there's other kinds of triggers, so we're going to unpack that some more. So those are common emotions. They're not rigid steps, and you might go back and forth. Anger, bargaining, anger, bargaining, acceptance, and then back to anger. You might kind of play with those things. So let's talk about the difference between bereavement and grief. If a person has normal grief, they have emotional and physical responses. I'm going to look at all my notes because I have tons. And they might have behavioral responses to any kind of a change. And so that might include being sleepless or sleeping in longer, having scenarios run through your head that affects your ability to sleep, and now you're tired, and now your back aches, and now your head aches, and now your shoulders ache, and now you're going to catch a cold. And it can drop your immune system. It can cause you to gain weight or lose weight because the body's hormones respond to that also. So the other thing would be you have vacillating emotional feelings, like remembering the good times, remembering the bad times, remembering the good times. And this can come up during the holidays too. So it is timely that I post this in December because it is the holidays and it is kind of the time when people set goals for next year. So if there's someone in your life who's no longer there, or somebody like a pet, or something that you used to have, like a job you used to like, and all your coworkers were gathering for Christmas parties and you were there for years, but now your job's not with you anymore. Those are some things that can be triggers for types of grief or depression that happen during the holidays. But grief, okay, normal grief, there's different kinds. So anticipatory grief, your daughter has cancer, your pet has tumors, your job lost your contract, your boyfriend's cheating on you. You can see that it's going to go downhill. It's going to go south. You're just not sure how long it's going to take. So now you're in the middle of anywhere between numbness and denial, and then maybe mixed with a little anger, like, damn it, if this is really going to happen, how am I supposed to prepare? And then, of course, there's the bargaining and the acceptance, like, what else can I do in the meantime? How can I mitigate these circumstances? And maybe even, what choices do I have? What do I still have to work with? The acceptance part is when you're trying to figure out if you have a workaround. So that would be anticipatory grief. The next one is disenfranchised grief. So that's a weird one because your loss isn't socially recognized or supported. Like, let's say you're gay and your boyfriend's in the hospital. And people used to say, oh, we're not going to talk about gay relationships. So this man can't talk about his partner of 15 years being in the hospital because nobody knows he's gay, right? And so that is a socially unsupported grief. It's actually called disenfranchised grief because people around you don't know what's going on. Other forms might be you didn't get promoted, or you can't get a handle on your weight, or you're using drugs and you can't get a handle on that. It's starting to affect your work performance. And these are things that are like embarrassing or in your mind frustrating because you can't get a handle on it, but you don't want to reach out, and so people don't know there's a problem. Like the lady who kept calling out sick at work. And it was because she was alcoholic and she couldn't get a handle on her alcoholism. So she was drinking and then, feeling sick and calling in sick a lot, and everybody else was carrying her workload. And, she's working her way toward termination, and she realizes that she's calling out too much. She can't get a handle on her drinking, and so now she's kind of getting grief-struck, trying to wrap her hand around that disenfranchised grief because she can't figure out what to do. And of course, this kind of borders a little bit on depression, doesn't it? Doesn't it sound a little bit like that? But I'll talk about that later. Complicated grief, which is kind of like a prolonged grief. It can be intense, it can be persistent, it can interfere with your life long after a loss. Let's say that you were married for 30 years and your loved one has crossed over, and now you don't have anyone to do all the rituals with, or the trips that you used to take, or the parties you used to attend, and those yearly events that you got so used to attending always together, and now you do them on your own. So in that case, you're talking about complicated grief, and it is interfering with your life. You're trying to figure out how to move on, and you might go through all those Elizabeth Kubler-Ross stages again, which include bargaining, depression, and acceptance, and those kind of going back and forth while you figure out how to deal with a problem that's going on in your life. The other thing would be traumatic grief. It's something that happens that's sudden or violent or unexpected. It can be a trauma, and you can have symptoms like PTSD, like your daughter has disappeared, or you can't find your dog, he got out and he's gone, or you just got a letter that you owe the IRS $20,000, something like that. Okay, other forms of traumatic grief could be including you got in a car accident and your legs are broken and you're sitting in a hospital bed. And you don't know what happened, and you don't know what kind of emotions to feel. And you are literally going through all those different stages. Numbness, anger, whatever, you're trying to work your way through those various stages. You might be bargaining like, please God, I'll be a nicer person if you don't let them amputate my leg, and I don't want to be in a wheelchair. And, you definitely start seeing your life path forming in front of you. So then there's some possible manifestations of grief that are outside that. For example, absent grief, showing no outward signs of grief after a loss. And that's numbness, right? That's that first stage. You're literally out of your body. You're not even grounded in your body. Your chakras, like, I think those might be that I had a person who had been incarcerated, and I didn't know that right away when I was scanning his chakras, but it was really apparent something was really up because all the chakras were tiny. It had squeezed all down like he was trying not to feel anything at all. And I think that would be happening with a person who's got absent grief. They're just kind of shutting their body down. They're not going to do anything till they figure out a plan for how to deal with it. If they're not very spiritual and they don't have some sort of social support group, if they're trying to deal with it on their own and they don't know how to deal with it, they might just be numb for a while. And of course, then they might substance use, for example, meth, cocaine, fentanyl, alcohol, something to try and help with the numbing or sustain the numbing longer. Then there's delayed grief, the reaction that surfaces much later than expected. You hope that your daughter will be returned or that your dog will come back, but a week passes and it hasn't happened yet, and you've been panic struck, and now it's turning to, what if he got smashed by a car? What if he's not going to come back at all? What if they never get him back? Looking at every single pound and calling everybody, thinking that maybe someone's gotten your dog and they'll never let him go. That kind of thing where you're like, when do I actually come to terms with this? Is it ever going to end? Delayed grief is a tough one because for a missing child or an abducted child, there may never be closure. In court cases, when they find bones and they arrest someone and sentence him, at least there's some kind of closure there, but the delay can be 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and sometimes the child's never found in the parent's lifetime, so delayed grief is a tough one. Cumulative grief would be experiencing multiple losses back to back that overwhelms the person. So I have a family member who lost a member of the family, followed by another member of the family, followed by another member of the family. And so that is compounding it. It's cumulative because you're trying to deal with the situation and then something else comes up. Exaggerated grief would be an overly intense reaction. Sometimes it's self-destructive. And we'll be talking a little bit later about what to do with this, but I'm just kind of giving them names for now. Intense reactions. See a person who doesn't cry at all when they're told that their son got hit while he was on his bicycle and they don't know if he's going to make it or not. Another person, in some cultures even, they'll beat their chest and wail and scream into the air. And sometimes the displays of grief are very cultural. So the wailing and the sobbing and those things, the outward manifestations that people do for cultural reasons, sometimes that's a display that's culturally acceptable. And in subcultures, some communities, within some families, within some church settings where people are more emotional in their own setting with the people around them, they may have more exaggerated forms of display that they use to help them process grief. The other thing would be masked grief. That's grief expressed as other symptoms. They have behavioral changes, they have physical symptoms, and they may not necessarily show sadness to you, but it doesn't mean they're not experiencing sadness. The person might go to work every day, but they might just be quiet, and they might be losing a lot of weight. Whatever's happening to them physiologically or emotionally, psychologically, they're not saying much about it, but the outward signs kind of show up. An ambiguous loss, grieving someone who's physically absent but psychologically present, like as in a dementia person or someone with Alzheimer or somebody with Parkinson's, where this is your partner and they're slowly slipping away and they're not the person they used to be, and you're coming to terms with a loss that really hasn't completely happened yet. I've also seen people who are in accidents and they recover, but it's a traumatic brain injury, so now the person can't speak right, or they walk with a limp, or they have a physical issue, or they need to be in a wheelchair, something where it is a kind of ambiguous loss. You're mourning how they used to be. There is a sense of mourning something that used to be present, but it's different now. Near-death experiencers go through that, and so do their families, because when the person comes back, sometimes what they've seen is so beautiful they don't want to come back here. I just watched a video about a Chinese man who was a tycoon, very high roller, big income, boasting about his sports car and his bank account and his beautiful suits, and then he slipped off a rock and drowned. And by the time he was done being resuscitated and came back, he had been on the other side. He met Jesus. He got a full rundown on what a rotten scoundrel he is and how his life really has no value at all. He built his whole house on sand. And time is running out, and he needs to follow a life path where he makes something of himself. He didn't want to come back, of course, but he was sent back. And so he was told, do better. And so this time, everyone was sure that the rock must have hit him in the head and he has brain damage, because he suddenly became compassionate and gave up his high roller position and his sporty life and became much more down to earth, much more person-centered, much more collegial, much more patient, much more of a giver. And they went, this is not the same guy. We don't recognize him anymore. So that right there is not necessarily grief, but it will be interpreted by others to be grief. Okay, collective grief happens when there's a shared mourning within a community or a group or a nation. And the examples that I thought about would be school shootings. You see it on TV and you go, oh my God, what if that was my school? Or maybe it is your school and the neighbor's child died but your son didn't. Or they're all on the bus together and see that the bus got hijacked and some of the children were taken hostage, but not your kid. You're grieving for the loss of all the people around you, but there's kind of a survivor's guilt there too, because and people come back from war with survivor's guilt. Like, what do you do when you're the one who survived and you came back in one piece, or at least with most of your body parts, and other people did not come back? The president was shot and nearly killed on national television. That was extremely traumatic. And another thing was a bridge collapse in Massachusetts. They can see the people on the bridge working. They can see the cars that were told not to pass because they were closing the bridge for repair. And then the giant steamboat, or whatever kind of ship that was, smashed into one of the pillars and collapsed the bridge. And those people that were on it, it took them a while to dig those people out. But the survivors are the family members, the wives, the children, the family of those workers that were on the bridge, and then everyone else horrified on national television looking at that bridge collapse. And what it means symbolically, the bridge was a symbol of that area. It was in Massachusetts. And it's a symbol of our freedom. What does it mean when you don't have that bridge anymore? How it limits transportation? What did it do to their city and their economy? What if that was our bridge? And you start to relate, these things become, well, look at the thing with Twin Towers. Look at the national mourning that happened and the collective grief that happened with Twin Towers. We're still reliving it every year on 9/11. So let's talk a little bit about what you do to deal with that. And before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about depression. Because bereavement will be long-term grief where you just can't pull yourself out of it. And you're just never going to get past it. The partner's still gone, the child is still gone. There's something that will just never be the same again. Some people memorialize a bedroom and just shut it off and leave it exactly the same way it was. Some people never marry again because they'll never find anyone like him or her. So bereavement can be crippling. It can be absolutely crippling. Then there's depression, and as we know, there's different kinds of depression. Manic depression, psychoaffective disorder, that's kind of a little bit of schizophrenia and depression. But what I'm describing right now are mental illnesses. And so with a mental illness, not just something that was created by a situation outside of you, but something that's being created by a situation inside of you. And so depression, clinical depression, is a whole nother kind of thing. It is not something that you want to handle by yourself. However, people very often do try to handle it by themselves. For certain types of depression, they'll use uppers, and for other types of depression, they use downers. And so it ends up being substance use disorder and substance abuse based on a person trying to self-medicate for depression. So if you have depression, if you have clinical signs of depression, not just grief, it's going to be something that's chemical. It could be a chemical disorder in your brain. If it's genetic, because it's your life path and it's a pre-life agreement, then it's something that's in your hands. You have to walk yourself to the doctor. You have to make the appointments. You have to engage a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a medical doctor and get some treatment, because if it's neurotransmitters and synapses in your brain, if there's a chemical shortage, 5 milligrams of something, just a tiny little bit, can fix that problem. And it can fix it very long term. So going to a medical doctor and getting blood testing done and talking about it is what you need to do. For some people, it's self-medication with alcohol, which is just going to drive your body into a state of needing more water, because it kind of sucks the water out of your body, being short on vitamins and minerals. So you might need to have some sort of better food. Maybe it's dietary. It could be socioeconomic, where you don't have the money for good food, good nutritious fruits, vegetables, and meats. Because if you're living off a diet of sugar or snacks or bagged foods or fast foods, you are nutrient deficient. And nutrient deficiency can cause depression. And so it can be dietary. It can also be environmental, because if you're living around with everybody who thinks that donuts are breakfast and a box of cereal is lunch, and then have a box of cereal for dinner, if all you're having is carbs, carbs, and more carbs, or maybe a bowl of French fries for dinner, if you have an all-carb diet or a mostly carb diet, you're probably nutrient deficient, and you will have some kind of chemical depression happening in your body because of the lack of nutrients that you need to sustain your body. It's taking your nutrients and turning it into the chemicals and the vitamins, the minerals, the proteins, whatever, that your body is utilizing to keep it running and being healthy. Just like a mechanic needs good car parts to keep your car healthy, if you go for a really long time with no water and no oil in your car, what's going to happen to your engine? Your brain's your engine. Okay, so let's talk about if it's not bereavement and it's not clinical depression and it's grief, okay? Something has happened to you and you're dealing with grief, and you need to have some practical ways to get over it. Just saying get over it, or it takes time, or sorry for your loss, that's not going to do it. You need to have an action plan. You need to have something that you can do. So let's talk about this, allowing yourself to feel. Go back and rewind that. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, stages of grief. What do? You want to practice grounding yourself and running your energy. Go back to my grounding video. You want to practice visualizing your chakras and visualizing your aura. Make sure your diet is balanced. So handle the things that are super obvious in your face. Vitamins, minerals, good diet, meat, vegetables, fruits. Right? 1 ingredients foods, a meat, a vegetable, a fruit. Do yourself a favor, eat really well. Don't skip meals, don't gorge, and don't eat junk food. Sitting there eating ice cream, staring at TV, or bunching on French fries because you don't want to cook anything else. You have to have nutrition. That's going to be pretty basic. The other thing is getting enough sleep. And if you can't sleep, well, okay, I understand that. Some people can sleep better if they put meditation music on, something to slow down busy brain. Do allow yourself time to slow down, because if you can't process as well, if thinking becomes an issue, if it keeps rehashing over and over in your head, things are going to move slower. But allow yourself to feel. Don't fight the sadness or anger or confusion. Let the tears flow and let your emotions surface. It might be a matter of there's one kind of meditation where you just sit and watch something and let it all play in your head, and just let it play out until it naturally fades into something else. And watching a bird can be a great form of distraction. Watching fish, watching something that you can interact with, or they're alive and you're watching, they're purposeful, going through their day, like watching the chickens or watching your dog. Dogs are great emotional support animals, very comforting. The other thing you can do is prioritizing your self-care. Make sure you're showering, make sure you're doing laundry, and doing the rituals in front of your face, like strip your bed and wash your linen, okay? Have clean blankets, have clean pillows, have clean underwear, for God's sake. Shower, wash your hair. The other thing would be expressing your emotions, talking, journaling, doing art. That's important because you need to get it out of you. The way to get numbness out of you is to write it out. And if it comes out as anger, fine. Just write it down. And, it can turn into a bunch of poetry or at least storytelling, even if all you do is write down, here's how it started and here's where I am now. And you journal on it. And it doesn't have to be something that's seen by anyone. However, your journaling can be very meaningful to another person going through the same thing. Reaching out to others, getting a support group, other people who might understand, that can be super helpful. If you have a church support group, a synagogue, a mosque, anything like that, if you want to share these with other people to the degree that they can understand or support you, allow that to happen. Talking about it, sharing stories and feelings with trusted friends, family, or support groups, I covered that. Journaling, writing down your thoughts, channel your emotions and track your progress, just writing it down, and date it too. Getting creative, use art, music, or dance to express what words can't. And I've seen an awful lot of very popular songs, like I'm a loser, baby. Remember that song? So even when he was in a really bad mood, he made a #1 hit single with a song that people could relate to when they weren't in a good mood. So even if it's not pretty, write it down. Some of the best artists have done their work when they were really depressed. Celebration. Cherished memories and sharing stories about your loved one. You might start to create a scrapbook. You might start to find ways to cherish those moments, and you can write them out while you're journaling. These are the things that we used to do together. These are the things that I was always doing. And they might be trigger moments, like the holidays or birthdays come up, and that's when you need to be journaling. Here's another example of something we would have been doing together. So right now we're expressing it and getting it out, because that part, getting it out of you, is seriously important, okay? Now, the next thing will be redefining and establishing new meanings. So what I wrote down is that healing isn't linear, it takes time, and it's okay to take it slow. And while you're at it, you redefine these moments. So you could say, well, last year I was doing this at this time, but this year the closest thing to that would be, going to go do that thing that you would have done with that other person or with your pet. Do it by yourself or change it to something else. We used to go to this coffee shop and now I go to that coffee shop.